Hi, everybody, and welcome to Chapter 2 of Security. Security exists in many different domains, and national security is only one of those areas. So let's take a dive into other areas in which security is paramount. So first is going to be proprietary security, and that's going to be security programs that are controlled and financed directly by a protected organization. What are the advantages of proprietary security? Typically, it's higher quality. There's more thorough training of the individuals who are providing security. There's more stability, greater respectability of the agency providing security. There's also contract security services that provides security services to individuals and organizations for a fee. There's hybrid security organizations, and that is a security operation that employs proprietary security staff and uses contract security personnel to supplement existing proprietary security staff. There are three pillars to an effective security program, and those are going to include physical security, personnel security, and information security. Physical security refers to tangible objects, introducing things like walls, fences, locks, manufacturing building designs that make things less, more impenetrable to promote the protection of people and property. Personnel security is going to be protection of persons associated with the organization and protection from individuals who might harm the organization. Information security is going to be the protection of information assets and systems against any threat to keep intellectual property and proprietary information protected. There's a multitude of different kinds of threats to safety and security, so we're just going to go through all the categories that generally are protected against. So the first is going to be accidents, and accidents are any acute or unintended event that leads to injury and even involving an event involving unplanned damage and unacceptable loss. Disasters, these are large scale. We're going to focus on man-made or natural events that result in casualties, destruction, damage, and disruption. Large disasters often overwhelm local emergency responses. So typically private responses have to be brought in as well. There's the goal of any agency is to increase safety and to mitigate the probability of the impact of accidents and disasters. And one of the ways that we do this is through something called a human factor analysis and classification system. And this is a model that examines the causal factors of accidents, and it assumes that accidents are the result of human error or holes, if you will, in the system of prevention that result in damage because of any of the following. So first, unsafe act by operators. Preconditions for unsafe acts that include factors in the work environment. So looking at the work environment and saying there are issues here, there are factors in the environment that are just unsafe, they're security hazards. Unsafe supervision, organizational climates related to safety procedures and policies that are lacking. So any sort of work environment that doesn't have security in place, doesn't have proper training in place, etc. You're going to see greater likelihoods of disasters in such environments. It's as a result of these issues and early or unsafe work environments that were common in the early 1900s in the Industrial Revolution that led to the creation of our largest regulatory agency of safety and security in the workplace, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also known as OSHA. This is a government agency that established workplace safety standards, requirements, laws, and regulations that must, by law, be met by companies in order to keep their workplaces safe for their workers. Why? Because human error is one of the most common causes of workplace accidents and can include any of the following. So mistakes in planning, lapses in carrying out job duties, violations that are deliberate deviations from safe practices, and also technical failures where all actions that were taken were appropriate, but an accident occurs nonetheless. Fire is the next major safety hazard that we're going to cover, and this is a serious concern for all organizations as it can result in harm or death and certainly interruption of production. One of the most famous workplace fire hazards that we saw that led to the development of OSHA was the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire disaster, which was early in the 1900s in the early Industrial Revolution. It was a factory where a fire broke out and there were all sorts of unplanned security hazards. Really, the workplace in the shirtwaist factory, nobody had ever evaluated it for safety, or areas of vulnerability that if an accident or a fire broke out in the workplace, what would they do? They had no plan, and it resulted in tremendous damage and loss of life, which ushered in OSHA. But any organization is susceptible to a potential fire. For fire to happen, there are three elements that are necessary, and that's going to be heat, fuel, and oxygen. If any of these elements are missing, combustion cannot occur. And fires are going to be classified into categories based on the combustibles that are present. The first is going to be a class A fire, which is ordinary combustible items are present. So things like wood, cloth, plastics, etc. And these are fires that can be extinguished with water or dry chemical agents. Class B fires have liquids that are present at the flash point. Excuse me. The vapors of the liquid are what burns. So things like kerosene need to be present, and then the vapors extinguish, catch fire. And you need a dry chemical to extinguish a Class B fire. There's also Class C, which is any energized electrical equipment, such as computers or appliances, where there's a malfunction, a spark that causes a fire. Class D is when there are the presence of flakes or shavings of combustible metals, such as magnesium, potassium, sodium, and this kind of a fire will require a specialized chemical agent and/or powders for extinguishing. And finally, there's Class K, and Class K is probably what you most commonly think of as a household-induced fire, where cooking devices or materials utilized in cooking that are combustible start the fire. Things like animal fats, vegetable oils, etc. These are going to be those fires that start in the kitchen in the home or in the kitchen in a commercial business. Fires can be categorized as any of the following. They can be arson-based, they can be accidental, or they can be natural, as in the case of wildfires, which we've had a noteworthy uptick and problem with here in the Western United States in the last 5 to 10 years. Shifting gears to other security issues, let's talk about workplace violence. Physical assaults and threats of assaults directed at those in the workplace are what constitutes workplace violence. This can be anything from harassing somebody all the way to homicide. Unfortunately, here in the United States, we have a high rate of mass shootings in the workplace, which constitutes workplace violence. Another category of concern is terrorism, and that is going to be the threatened or actual use of illegal force and violence by a non-state actor in order to attain a political, economic, or religious ideology. This is done through fear, coercion, or intimidation, and it can certainly impact the workplace, and in addition to causing harm and destruction. Certainly, we saw after the 9/11 attacks that entire industries were shut down and interrupted. Even industries that weren't in the Twin Towers, that weren't in the Pentagon, etc., were interrupted because of terrorist acts. So, and certainly we all learned, on 9/11 and thereafter that we need to have plans of response in place in case of an event such as this. Civil unrest is another security issue, and that's where groups of individuals disrupt communities and businesses through protests, violence, and other acts of civil unrest. This can often devolve into rioting, which can result in injury. It can result in death. We frequently see destruction to businesses when rioting occurs, and to the point where the business may not be able to operate. So again, these are security concerns for industry and organization. There are also man-made disasters, and these are disasters that occur because of hazards that are created by humans. So, for example, the Chernobyl explosion, the near meltdown at 3 Mile Island. These are all examples of man-made disasters where security plans need to be implemented and practiced, not just implemented, but practiced in order to avoid incidents such as these from occurring. There are environmental accidents and disasters where exposure to hazardous materials through mine explosions or gas leaks, etc. So we recently, in recent years, we saw this in Palestine, Ohio, when there were chemicals that were, exposed to a local town when there was a train incident. The Exxon Valdez is another really good example of that, with the giant oil spill where there was a man-made disaster on an oil cargo ship, and it got punctured and just flooded hundreds and hundreds of thousands of gallons of oil into the local environment, killing tons of fish and birds and requiring a huge cleanup. Warfare is a big one. This is a man-made event that causes destruction, death, and damage to infrastructure, interruptions to the supply chain. Certainly, when there's warfare in a given area, it is not business as usual. Businesses shut down, businesses aren't in production, which means goods aren't moving, etc. And the war effort, places that produce company goods and services that are important to a war effort are going to be targeted by enemy combatants. And finally, there's natural disasters, and these are situations or events caused by nature that overwhelm the local capacity. This requires external assistance from national and sometimes international levels, based off of the level of damage and human suffering.